Hi everyone, you are listening to She Leads with Carly. I am incredibly excited about our guest today, Haley Rosen, a fellow Stanford soccer alum. Haley is the founder of Just Women's Sports, a company dedicated to promoting and highlighting women's sports. Only 4% of sports coverage is dedicated to women, and Haley is set out to change that. As a former collegiate and professional soccer player, Haley has experienced her fair share of injuries and setbacks along the way. And now, she carries the lessons she learned to be resilient as a young entrepreneur. And beyond her time as an athlete, we also chat about the transition after professional soccer into the workplace, and the period of finding your passion while also overcoming self-doubt along the way. So much in this chat with Haley. I really loved it, and I hope you do too. Hello, Haley. Thank you so much for joining She Leads today. I am so excited to have you on the show. So thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Okay, so Haley, you are the founder of Just Women's Sports. So only 4% of sports coverage is dedicated to women's sports, which is crazy. But you, Just Women's Sports, is here to change that, which is incredible, and I'm excited to talk to you more about it. But before Just Women's Sports, you worked at Striver in operations and marketing, and I'm obviously so thrilled to have you because we are both Stanford women's soccer players, or as we like to call Stanny soccer hotties. And also at Stanford, post-Stanford, you played professionally in the U.S. as well as abroad. So we'll get to all of that, but I love to start my guests off with, take me back to Stanford days, really in this moment, like your experience at Stanford, what did you imagine your career in, or like what were you thinking about in this moment kind of for your future?
Yeah. I think when I came to Stanford, I was very singularly focused on soccer. Obviously wanted to be at Stanford because it's an amazing opportunity, an amazing school, but soccer was definitely like my first, second, and third priority. Like it was my whole focus.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your experience. I've done some research, and I know it was far from ideal because of injuries. And oftentimes, only until really your fifth year of eligibility, you were able to actually play a full season. So how did this affect mentality? Because, I understand it. So explain it more to, those who are watching, how impactful, like being injured and how it's so hard to actually get through.
Yeah. You've really done your homework. I came in, what I just said, I came into Stanford and I think I was immature, right? Like I was so focused on soccer that I don't think I took advantage or was really thinking about all that was in front of me and like what an awesome opportunity Stanford was. Yeah. But injuries sort of forced me to do that. So my freshman year, I came in and tore my hamstring. My sophomore year, it was a game against Oregon very early in the season. I tore ligaments in my ankle. It's funny how you still remember these things all these years later. Junior year, had a really bad concussion that took me out, and that kind of ended up going into my senior year. I only really had one full season. Yeah. And that was really, really hard mentally and emotionally, especially because, we play year round, and we have a really, really intense off season. You know this, right? Like you're up super early, you're training in the summer, and it's hard and it's intense and it's draining. And I just had this weird rhythm where in the off season, I was healthy, I was fit, I was feeling good, and the season would come around and I would get hurt. And that was just so it's so devastating and so draining and so emotional. And I think it's really hard to really sort of recalibrate expectations and stuff, especially when you're having such strong off seasons. So, injuries, I don't want to say everything happens for a reason or this happened because of that, but I do think injuries are a big reason why I'm starting Just Women's Sports today and maybe why I'm, not playing anymore. So maybe everything happens for a reason. I don't know.
So tell me, during this time, was there a moment where you were like, okay, maybe I have to rethink my future, my dream of being on the national team, my dream of playing in a World Cup? When did that shift happen, or even playing professionally? How did you approach kind of, getting to fifth year, senior year, and really post-college?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I think it was a slow downfall. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like, oh, I had a career ending injury, or, oh, I had this one moment where I didn't think I could play at this level. It just was, yeah, I mean, I think I had just like bad luck after bad luck after bad luck. And at some point I do think, a lot of the dreams I had or ambitions I had just had almost passed me by, especially in college when you're hurt for 4 years and you're literally not on the field. Like, you lose out on opportunities. And, but I held on tight, it was like such a dream of mine. And like, ever since I was really little, like, my dream was to be on the U.S. women's national team, and I wanted, to play in the Olympics and play in the World Cup. And like, I loved soccer, and like that, I think that's the biggest reason why, for me, every injury I just kept coming right back, because, like that feeling of like being on the field, competing for national championships, competing, for Pac-12 championships. It's like, it feels all so long ago, but like, that's awesome. Like, playing, it's awesome. Like, I absolutely love the sport. There's like no better feeling than that, like, freedom that you feel in the field. And like, I feel like there was like, no matter the injury, I was like, I got to get back to that. I want to be back on the field. I want to, like, I just loved it, and I think when you love something so much and you've dedicated so much of your life, like, it is really hard to like let it go and move on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Haley, this also just shows such a character trait. Like, it's not, as you said, it's not easy, but like that resilience, that perseverance to be like, you know what, this is another bump in the road. I had it, last year, I had it the year before, but I'm still going to come back and, fight for that national championship and whatnot. So you managed to, you played pro in the U.S., I believe for Washington Spirit, and then also abroad. So tell me about, being a professional player. And almost, I think even more so, like going a little more beyond professional is, from my understanding from other people, it's really easy to get like warped in this bubble of professional soccer, right? And like, it's not many people step away. So what made you really realize, like from the beginning, were you like, okay, this is a short-term stint, or is this like, or what was your mindset going into professional? Did you kind of still see it long-term, or how did you approach it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. You're super right? Because like, you get the women's professional, I can only speak to the soccer world, right? Is like very small. It's like 9 teams, 10 teams now, right? There's only so many girls. At this point in your career, everyone, all the coaches. So like, it's really easy to get like singularly focused and like kind of block out the outside world, which I do think is like important. Like, that's part of being an elite athlete. Yeah. But I think for me, that was a little bit of a jarring experience, because sort of for 2 main reasons. Like, the first was my whole life, like, I always had like school and soccer and this and that, like, and soccer was my priority and it was my focus and it was my love and passion. I put so much into it, but I had a lot of other things. And I think when when I was with the Washington Spirit, I was living in Gaithersburg, Maryland, away from my friends, away from my family, away from my boyfriend. Not that, boyfriends matter that much when we're talking careers, but you get what I'm saying, away from the people that you like love and care about. I had, you don't have enough time like for another job. It's really hard to even do like a part-time job or an internship. Like, it does take up so much of your day. Yeah. And I didn't have anything else in Gaithersburg. Like, I'm from LA. Like, I didn't know this world. And that was really jarring, because soccer doesn't just become your priority. It literally becomes everything. And that was a little bit tough for me. As much as I loved it, it had never been everything. And then 2 was, and this is changing, but like, you come out of college, and college is like so professional. Like, you're getting the best swag and the best gear. And, at Stanford, like, our facilities were unbelievable. And like, I even think like the balls at Stanford, like the soccer balls were so nice, and like a nice soccer ball, like, that's a big deal, and you go to the professional scene and it's not as professional as college, and you don't have the trainer and you don't have, the assistant coaches, and the level of professionalism isn't there, which like isn't the end of the world, but it just, I think like the training just becomes not as impactful, and like if you need, like, you have a knock or something, you don't have the resources to recover as quickly. And like, that was just weird to me, because I had been used to competing like at this level, and all of a sudden we're professional and it's this level. And like, I don't know, it sounds spoiled when I say it out loud, but I was like a bit like, oh, like, this is it? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, even, and I think what's interesting is like the professional level, the players are, it's the same level players wise, or even better, because it's all the greatest, but it's almost like everything else that comes with it is like kind of taken a notch down being at Stanford in this incredible institution. And I know, like, I understand completely what you're saying, how it's just, it's the best treatment that you can get as an athlete. So I definitely understand that. So in this moment also, did you have, like your families and or like mentors along the way saying like, look, Haley, like, don't, like, you can do so much outside of soccer, or like, don't stay in this bubble for too long? Or was it kind of just, what, this is not really what I expected, and I'm gonna give it a year or two and then really move on?
Yeah, I didn't really get pressure one way or another.
Yeah.
My family, we're very close, but they're like very hands off on what I do. They're always like, "Yay, good job!"
Yeah.
So I definitely had a lot of freedom, no pressure to like stay or leave the sport. For me, like, I don't know, like, I just continue to struggle with injuries, and like really like kind of my story and part of why I had so many injuries was my freshman year. I tore the labrum in my hip, and I needed surgery, and I refused to get it because I didn't want to be out for a year and a half because I was an 18-year-old kid and being super short-sighted. And my hip is like what ended up leading, like, every injury that I've had it was my right hip, and it was been on my right side. So like, and that really came to a head when I was in DC and when I was abroad in the UK. Like, I mean, I hurt my right knee, I was hurt my right ankle. Like, my hip had maxed out, and that really pushed me to like, a big part of that too was like, it sucks being out. Like, it just sucks. It sucks when you're standing on the sideline and you're just like, you're watching people earn your spot when you've been like battling for it. Like, that just sucks. Like, there's no way around it. But also what started happening was I was in so much pain that it became less fun. Like, it just wasn't, as much as like you love to play, like, it's just not fun to be in pain all the time. So I actually recently had hip surgery, and I'm a whole new person. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, part of me was like, is it time to go back? Am I ready? But I think like, ultimately for me, my story was injuries sort of forced me out of the sport probably sooner than I would have liked. But I'm not like I'm, maybe not the story I would have written for myself, but like, it is my story. So here I am.
Yeah. And I think before I ask the next question, I think one thing also that you mentioned is like when you were 18, like being so short-sighted. I think that's like such a good lesson for college athletes, specifically like, freshman year. You think it's like the end of the world if you can't play that freshman season, but like it kind of affected you years after. So it's almost just like take that, short break or longer break just so you can be healthy for long term. But okay, so
yeah,
going pro or coming out of pro and really like, tackling the job market. Take me through this. Like, you found Striver, and so you got a master's in communication at Stanford, and it was largely in VR, in virtual reality. And this Striver implements this. So how did this happen, and how was this like almost mentally for you? Was this like, okay, this is exciting, I'm in the job world, I'm in the workforce, or how is it?
Yeah, Striver was like fully my dream job because my Jeremy Bailenson is a professor at Stanford. I took his class like first quarter of my freshman year at Stanford and just like fell in love with him and what he was doing and the whole sort of VR sports intersection. Just loved it, was really excited about it. Yeah. And I ended up doing my master's in communication and worked in his virtual reality lab and learned more about Striver and what they were doing. So this is like my dream job. Like, I left soccer when I left because they had raised money and they were hiring, and I was like, this is right, this is time, like, I'm hurting, this is like my dream job, like, let's go.
Amazing.
And I was so excited. Like, I really, really believed what we had done. Like, I had done a lot of research around it, so I was like literally in the lab, had done research to support this type of work. So it's just like really exciting. And like, I think being in companies in the early days is just like fun. There's so much happening. There's like, you're hustling and you're figuring stuff out, and there's so much moving and changing. And that was an awesome, awesome experience. Like, those guys, like the founding team there, like, we still text. They've been like the number one Just Women's Sports supporters. Like, that was an awesome experience for just so many reasons. Personally though, that was like, coming out of soccer was a really difficult transition. Like, I'm curious how it's been for you. Like, that was as much as like, it was time and I had bad luck and I had injuries, like, still like ripping off the Band-Aid like was really hard. Like my whole identity, who I was, why I worked out, why I ate the way I did, why I went to bed at, this hour, like it was all built around soccer. And then you take that out and like, I really felt like lost and like struggling for like purpose, which was like it was a weird situation because it was sort of like, I was really excited about my new job and this new life, but I really like was sort of mourning the life that I had before,
Yeah. And it's not even like the life you had, but it's also what you envisioned that life. It's still taking away that, that dream and that future you envisioned for yourself with soccer. And you really didn't similar to me, like you don't think of anything else other than soccer and you're like, this is the future. So I definitely, that's so in this moment, like what do you attribute getting through that? Like was it just time and, or did you have people that supported you and said you're doing the right thing, or how did you get through that almost like identity / ripping that Band-Aid off?
I think it's just, for me, like, I think it was just time and then like trying a bunch of stuff. Like I'm, like having like a passion, I think is like such a gift, you know what I mean? And I'm curious if you felt like this too. Like I was so passionate about soccer and it was so fun and there was so much love there that like that drove me and like almost drove every decision and, every sacrifice was like so worth it for the love. And like losing that love, like it's hard. And I think at first I was just like kind of sad and weird, but then I feel like I kind of made a point of like trying new things and trying like, do I like playing rec league soccer, or do I want to get into triathlons, or do I want to get super into yoga? Like, and I tried a bunch of different things, and there was a long period of time where nothing was really like sticking for me. And, I think a big part of sort of pulling out of that phase was sort of being okay and being a little bit lost and just being okay and trying to find stuff that made me feel grounded, while I sort of figured out like my next thing and my next passion.
Yeah. I think for me, I could relate to a lot of the things you said. I think for me, it's just happened like sooner than you. Like the same process happened sooner. So I think I've had like time almost to accept, if you will. But also it's similar to you, like trying different things and like finding, other things I'm passionate about. Because it's almost like you're in this mindset where like soccer, and so my only passion is, as you said, it kind of like you wake up in the morning and the first thing you think of like, what type of practice is it today? Is it like a Tuesday where you're going to run after? Is it a pregame practice? Is it, so all of that.
Tuesdays were the worst.
Yeah, Tuesdays were the worst for sure. And so I can definitely, I think a big part was like discovering other things and realizing, oh wow, like just as much as, soccer gave me that passion, now other things are feeding me and giving me that energy. And I think that's
absolutely, that's really well said.
Yeah. So now take me, how long did you work at Striver for before you, or how long was that process before, moving on to now Just Women's Sports, which we'll get into shortly?
Like a little over a year.
Okay.
Year plus some change.
Yeah. So tell me about Just Women's Sports. First off, did you always like see yourself as an entrepreneur? Did you have this like energy and this grit, like, like did you always see yourself starting something one day, or how did it all happen? What was the inspiration in actually getting started?
Yeah. Like my whole experience playing professionally, like we've talked about injuries and stuff, but what I saw when I was playing professionally was we were selling out stadiums, attendance was up, viewership was up, investment was up. And that was true in the US and abroad. And it just seemed like there was so much positive momentum in the space. And when I left and I was working at Striver, there was just genuinely no way to follow that world. And I had always been a part of it. My friends were still playing. I knew the coaches, I knew the teams. And the way I was following was like, literally following my friends on social media and seeing like game day or like good team win, stuff like that. And that just didn't make sense to me and it didn't map to my experience. And I just continued to think like, why isn't there more coverage? We hear that 4% statistic and it sounds low, but being on the outside, like looking in, it's like really, really low. And it like just didn't make sense to me. So Just Women's Sports started as an Instagram account, basically. Just started like reposting women's sports highlights, which I don't know how legal that is from a copyright perspective, but that's fine.
Yeah.
And just started reposting women's sports highlights. And at the time, like I really knew nothing about social. Like my personal social media is a sad place. It's just, I don't know, pictures of my dog, like just lame. And we just started growing and growing and growing. And that was sort of like our first like point of validation of like, okay, like I feel like there's other people that are interested. And if we, if we build it, there's an audience there that's like ready for this type of content and wants this type of content. And that's really sort of what launched this whole idea of like a bigger, women's sports media platform.
Yeah. So in these early stages, when like things were picking up and it was getting momentum and you were like, you know what, this could be something. What were some challenges you faced in those early stages? And like, how did you get through that?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I have personally faced is like, to kind of answer your question about like, did I envision myself as an entrepreneur? Like, probably not. Like, no, I just like felt like there was this amazing opportunity and that like I wanted to go get it and like fight for this and like fight to change the space. And so I think in the early days, like, and it's still something I struggle with, but it like self-doubt, like, am I the person to do this? Am I equipped? Am I ready for this type of opportunity? And like really having to learn, like, I don't know the answers to those questions, but like, I'm doing it. So I better go for it. And I better like give it all I got and believe and just fight and push and give everything I got. So that's like, I've definitely, it's like, you don't realize when you start, or I didn't realize when I started all this, that it'd be such like a personal journey for me.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a valuable lesson in life and not just, in anything you do. I think it's very common, especially coming from Stanford where you feel like, okay, am I, do I belong here? And the imposter syndrome and things like that. So I think it's just having that, like reminding yourself and having that self-belief and just, going for it and being like, you know what, worst case, I fail right now, but I'll learn from it. So I think that's very, very great. So tell me about your experience as you're the solo founder, and also, obviously She Leads. I want to talk about your experience as a female founder. So tell me a little bit about that, where, like going to get funding. Have you ever experienced like, okay, because I'm a female and I'm walking into the room, maybe, my chances are lesser, and, there's obviously a gap and we don't have to go to the numbers, but tell me about if you've ever experienced things like that and how you kind of addressed it.
Yeah, I think it's this whole point is like really interesting to me and something I've thought about a lot. For me, like, I don't really feel like my experience of that has been all that unique, which I think is like part of the problem. I'm very used to being like the only woman in a room, or I'm very used to like, frankly, like questionable comments,
Right.
It can be tough, but, I think for us, like our company is built by a female founder and it's a big bet on women. And like what we're asking people to do is to bet on women. Yeah. And it is interesting seeing that people, not everyone, right? And we're like finding our allies and we're finding people that believe, and like women's sports is just growing and growing and growing. And like all of that has worked in our favor, but especially in the early days, like, we launched January 2020, right? And we had raised money a little bit before that. And this was like, right around the World Cup and stuff, and asking people to bet on women and believe in women and saying, women's sports, like this is the next market. Like, look at all these trends that are pointing to this. Like, it's time to invest in this space. Like, the opportunity is wide open. We want to go get it, and we got a lot of pushback, and like, again, like we found our allies, but, we get a lot of feedback. Women's sports will never be mainstream. Women's sports will never be as big as men's sports. Women's sports is a limited market opportunity. And like, I just fundamentally disagree with that. And not in like a go girl way, just in like, look at the numbers. Like people love sports, right? Like, why wouldn't you love more sports? The NWSL just had, 600,000 plus viewers in their final, which is more than there's like a Man City Chelsea game on the men's side. Like, this space is exploding, and like, it's like for us, it's sort of like, we're looking around being like, all right, I guess we're the only ones going to go get it, but like, we're going to go get it. I feel myself rambling, but I guess my biggest point is like, it has been interesting that I do think like there's this whole thing, on social media and stuff like bet on women, and that's uncomfortable for people. And that's okay. Like we're going to push past that and overcome it, but it's definitely uncomfortable for people.
Yeah. And so, okay, I can go in a bunch of different directions, but but obviously like this space as it's, or actually, getting those no's and getting people who are, like saying, okay, it'll never be the same as men's sports, which is, as you said, like it's crazy. It doesn't make sense even from a, from a personal value, but also based on the numbers. So how did you almost like keep yourself motivated, but also like not only yourself, but also put this front to your team and say like, look, that's just one opinion. It doesn't matter. We're still going for this, and it's still, very important.
So look, every trend is on the side of women's sports, right? It's almost like half of all athletes are now women, but 4% of sports coverage is women. Like every trend is on the side of like, this space is just exploding, right? And like, I now know these women. We work with these women. They're on our team. Like I've played with them. They're working on Just Women's Sports with us. Like they're awesome, right? And like women's sports are dope. Like I don't know if you saw the Challenge Cup, but like that was great soccer. And the WNBA happening now, like that is great basketball. Like women's sports are dope, right? And it's easy for me. Like I believe that with like every fiber of my being. And I really like, I 100% just believe in the future of women's sports. Like I just think everything you see on the men's side, you will see on the women's side, and maybe more, right? Because we know that like women control the spend in most households, and like it's just a very interesting market, right? So my point is, when I get negative feedback or if there's stuff that doesn't go our way, like it does not waver my doubt in the space. And so like for me, like, I've said it, like I've struggled with self-doubt, but I've never wavered on this opportunity. Like women's sports will be the next thing. I think that's the biggest trend we're going to see in the next 10 years. And like we as a company, like we are fighting for this space, and we want to create that flywheel. Like as women's sports grows, we grow. As Just Women's Sports grows, women's sports grow. Like we want to be a part of that. We want to evolve the space. We want to push for change. And like, I have no doubt that's going to happen.
Yeah, I love it. So, okay, one more question before we get to the fun questions. But I read on one of your Medium blog posts, which I recommend anyone to go because it's just so authentic and I love it. But one thing is you mentioned how you're a perfectionist and you've always been a perfectionist. So I'm wondering kind of how are you balancing almost like having this perfectionist mentality, but also, as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of things out there that says like you can't wait for perfection or you're never going to do anything.
Yeah.
And guests on my show have said the same thing. So how do you balance that? And what advice would you give to others who also are similar mindset, who want to start something, but they're, cutting themselves because,
Yeah, no, I think it's just like, this is a big one. I think like the biggest thing is like what I learned early on is, I can only really speak to my experience, and like what we sort of learned early on is what I just said. Like I really believe in women's sports, right? And we had all these like theses around like, I think this will be the right content strategy or that will be the right content strategy. So in the very, very early days, it was easy to say like, all right, we are going to do this. And before we push it live, it's going to be 100% perfect and polished and the whole shebang, right?
Right.
And then we push it out there and we get feedback, and maybe it was like the wrong strategy, or we should have done this, or we should have done that. And like, I have just come to believe like the iterative approach is like 100% right. You need to like push it out, get feedback, push it out, get feedback, push feedback, and you just need to get better and better and better. And that's really, really hard to do as a perfectionist. It's like really, really hard when you're like, but I see the flaws,
Yeah.
And I think it's like almost like creating like two truths in your mind that like, okay, I see the ways that this could be better, and we're going to do that. We're going to make these things better, but I'm also still really excited about what this is, and I believe in it, and I still think it's really, really good. And like, for me, it's been creating that separation of like, we just launched our podcast, and it's easy for me to say, oh, like, this could have been better, that could have flowed better, maybe the music volume was too high, and maybe all those things are true, right? And that's a bucket, like that's an area of improvement. Yeah. But I also know like we launched something dope, and these are like awesome interviews, and they're authentic and they're real, and the reception has been great, and the download numbers have been great, and like celebrate that win as we keep pushing for that next level. And like that's something that that's something I did not do in soccer that I'm really trying to do with Just Women's Sports, is like hey, that was awesome, and this is how we make it even better. Like, and it's just a different mindset for me personally.
No, I love it. I think that is so incredibly useful. And also, I feel like you also have to recognize that, like, most people are not thinking, to that extent, to those details. So, like, at the end of the day, it's even, I think it's perfect. So, I love that. Okay, Haley, last 2 questions. What is a passion or hobby that you have that's just unrelated to your work?
It's so hard because COVID is so weird, but I'm a big fan of yoga. I haven't done much of it lately, but I'm a big yoga fan.
Nice. I like it. And then my last question is, what is a fun or weird talent that you have that's really, that no one really knows about? And so, as I said, I'm going to show you mine. Usually I do blueberries, but today I'm in a new location, so I had to be creative with this. So we're going to do almonds. All right.
Let's see it.
Also, the roof is a bit short, so we'll see.
All right, let's see.
Okay.
Woo, look at that. That is quite a talent. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
I don't think I'm as talented as you. I don't think I have anything like that.
You don't have to show it. It's okay. Don't feel pressured.
What? Really, this is like your hardest question. I don't know that I have a sneaky talent. The only thing I can think of is I used to be a dancer, like in high school and stuff, and I can still do the splits.
Oh, okay, cool. What type of dance did you do?
I did ballet and lyrical and jazz. Wow. I was like, did the whole thing. We did competitions. I wore the big makeup.
Oh my God.
That was me. That was another life.
I know all of my 2 older sisters, they did all of that, all their whole life. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So I know what that entails, but I was always on the, watching from the audience rather than doing it.
That's so funny. I always tell my mom that in another life I was a Broadway dancer, but definitely not this one.
No, that's so funny. Well, Haley, I have loved this so much. So thank you for coming on She Leads. I've learned so much. And as you said, Just Women Sports just came out with a podcast, which is so great, and I recommend it to anyone. So thank you so much. I've loved it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Of course.